Hello, thanks for tuning in to Town Meeting TV's coverage of Town Meeting Day 2025. My name is Megan O'Rourke and I'm your host here at Town Meeting Television. This program is part of a series of programs we're hosting in advance of March 4th, Town Meeting Day. These forums are made possible by Town Meeting TV's generous underwriting partners. You can find all of our forums at cctv.org/TMD 2025. Tonight, you're going to hear from candidates running for various school district seats, all uncontested. So we have 5 seats that are open on March 4th. That's the East District, the South District, the North District, the Central District, and we also have Ward 1 seat. Just to let you know, Gary Golden, who had the East District seat, is now running for the Ward 1 seat, and his seat is open. And we have Matthew Price running in the East District seat. So we're going to hear from these folks that are here with us today. It's Matthew Price, Jean Waltz, Jeff Wick, Kendra Sowers, and we'll start with opening statements. And Kendra, we'll start with you. And if you're watching at home and you have any questions for these fine folks, 802-862-3966. Call us with your questions. Kendra, we'll start with you with an opening statement. Just welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Glad to be here. My name is Kendra Sowers. I am the North District School Commissioner, the current one. I am running for my 4th term, so it's exciting. Just a little bit about me is I have had 3 kids go through the Burlington schools, and my youngest is now a sophomore in college, so I no longer have students in the Burlington School District, but have always been involved from when they were little in preschool to being in PTOs and in the classroom. So I decided to be on the board 6 years ago just to continue to make a difference in our schools, and I feel like my kids got a really great education, and I wanted to continue that. I am a small business owner as well here in South Burlington, and so I feel like I can bring some of that business acumen to the board. And I have been the chair of the Finance and Facilities Committee for the past, I'm going to say 4 or 5 years. And I feel like this next couple of years is going to be super challenging and important financially. We're having some discussions at the state level about our education funding. And I feel like I'm going to bring that past knowledge. I feel very confident about knowing and having experience with our current education funding. And so I'm wanting to help think about the future of our education funding and help shape that for Burlington and for the state of Vermont.
Great. So we'll have more questions for you on that. Jeff Wick, and tell us what district you're seeking re-election in.
Sure. Thanks, Megan. I'm Jeff Wick. I am seeking re-election in the South District, in the South End, Wards 5 and 6. And this will be my, well, assuming that there isn't a huge write-in candidacy. Okay, that could happen. But this will be my 5th term, therefore years 9 and 10 on the school board. For the last 7 of those, I've been the vice chairman of the board. For a number of those years, I was the chair of the collective bargaining committee, negotiating the teacher and other union contracts. And thank you for recently stepping up, Kendra, and I'm sort of stepping back a little from that role. I'm really proud of the last 8 years on the board. We've I think had responsible budgets, and each year we've run modest surpluses, which is a very good thing. We've navigated a lot of challenges, as everybody listening to this probably knows, with not just with COVID, but with the shutdown of the high school due to PCBs, and then trying to figure out where we're going to put our high schoolers to educate them. Thankfully, we found Macy's, and it's worked out okay, but we're very, very excited that we're going to have a new high school pretty soon. As everybody knows, it's looking great, and to the best of my knowledge, I think it's within budget, which is truly remarkable. What else? One of the things I like about our school board over the last 8 years 7 years, I'll say, is I think we've taken a lot of the drama out of the school board here in Burlington, Vermont, out of the school board activities and community and all that. I think we've had a certain level of professionalism and respect, and I hope humility and empathy for all those community members, staff, teachers, students. And one of the things I'm also most proud of, which I certainly can't take credit for, is hiring Superintendent Tom Flanagan several years ago. I think Tom has turned out to be an amazing hire. We're very lucky to have Tom and his team. We've got a very strong team in the superintendent's office and elsewhere. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Jeannie Waltz in the Central District, right?
Correct. This will be also my third term. No, fourth term for, oh my gosh. Yeah, so, but I was elected in a special election a little bit before, so I've been on the board for a little over 6 years. My interest is, I've always been in education my entire adult life. Actually, one of my first jobs living in Burlington was working at BHS. But I've done everything from taught after school, been a para in elementary schools. I've done a lot of alternative type programs, pilot type things at different schools through Very Special Arts Vermont, which is just known as BSA Vermont now. But I've been teaching, I'm a classroom teacher, I'm an art teacher at Rock Point School, which is a boarding school. Anyway, the interest that really drew me to the board was wanting to support alternative pathways, different ways of serving students, not necessarily one size fits all mentality. So I really enjoyed working with everybody on the board and hearing their support for things like the tech center and alternative pathways, anything from what you would consider like differential instruction. I am running again mostly because once you get invested in some of these issues, it is really hard to see them come under fire, referring very much to what Kendra's talking about, more specifically the funding mechanism around the pupil-weighted system. It is an equitable component of our educational funding system, and it is an integral part of how students get their needs met. So after working for 5 years on the Coalition for Vermont Student Equity, and being a part of seeing a law be put into place where actual data, real numbers were applied to how much a student needs financially to be educated, seeing that go through and having it only really be the beginning of the implementation process, right? And now it's already being discussed as being something that it's vulnerable again. So of course I really am just concerned, and I'm ready to advocate for that to stay in place and hopefully even look better.
Okay, great. We'll talk about that a little bit more. Matthew Price, you're running for the East District. And just because I think we didn't talk about it, but for those folks at home, we have 3 cameras here, and there's a red light on the camera. So if our folks here want to know which camera we're looking at, it's the red light. And if you're watching at home and you want to call 802-862-3966. Introduce us, and why are you running for the school board?
Yeah, hi, my name is Matthew Price. I am a resident of Ward 1. I'm running for the East District Commissioner. I am a clinical psychologist and professor at the University of Vermont, where I oversee our doctoral program in clinical psychology. And my background is really in working with individuals who've been through traumatic events and helping those folks manage through and get through those difficult stressors. And seeing that the number of stressors that our students in the Burlington Public School District are having to deal with due to many things that are happening in the world, I feel like it's really important to be involved in that process and figuring out how we can best support those students. I myself am the product of public schools, going from elementary school through my doctorate at public institutions, and so I'm excited at the opportunity to give back and be a part of the public school system. I'm also the product, both in terms of my education, but also my mother was an elementary school teacher, and I remember the processes of helping her set up that classroom in August every year, and taking it down in June at the end of every year. And so just excited to be involved in knowing, supporting the teachers and the staff that make our school system wonderful. And having grown up in an environment where I see both sides, how that helps the students and helps the children who are being educated, and also the challenges that many of our educators are facing. And so I'm excited to have a chance to be involved in helping move our school system forward.
Great, thank you all. We do have a list of questions, and I think the top question on most voters' mind has to do with the school budget. $135 million proposed school budget, which is a decrease by about $10 million, is that right? From last year's budget, and it looks like it's going to be a property tax rate reduction. So it seems like for voters it may be like, well, that makes sense, let's vote for it. But tell us a little bit about why. Can I safe to assume everybody here supports this budget? You worked on this budget, you support this budget. So tell us a little bit about what stands out for you, and we will kind of go around on this. What stands out for you, starting with you, Jeff, about what you support in this budget and why you really want folks to come out for it?
Sure, absolutely. Well, the bottom line right now is that, well, and you all know that state education funding is a very complicated thing, and it's not intuitive at all. So in many ways, there are parts of our budget that are increasing. Things like wages, health insurance, debt service for the high school, and those are the main ones that I can think of right now.
For those of us who, debt service, just 30 seconds. Tell us the 30-second debt service. What does that mean?
Oh, debt service, yeah. What that means is inside our operating budget, as if we were a homeowner, we have to pay the mortgage on our debt. And so, for example, a couple of years ago, thank you to everybody who voted yes for the high school bond, $165 million. At the time you voted yes, you authorized it, but over the last couple of years, as we've geared up the construction, that's when we've had to draw the money, borrow the money. And so debt service just means the principal and interest payments we have to make each month.
Yeah.
And that's kind of gone up a bit, quite a bit over the last couple of years because of that bond. It's going to go up a little more the following year, and then it sort of levels off for a number of years. So that's the debt service piece.
Got it, thanks.
But in general, the punchline or bottom line is, based on the state education funding formula and what we know right now, we're anticipating a 4% decrease in your education property tax bill, which comes out in July. And that's about 70% of your overall tax bill. The other 30% is the city's budget.
Great, great. So is there something besides those like basic, what you talked about, wages, healthcare, the debt service, is there something that you feel really excited about in this budget?
Well, in part, I'm excited about, during COVID, school districts and other municipalities got a lot of money to spend. And that's going away or gone away. And thankfully, we didn't get too excited about investing that money into additional people, because when it goes away, we would have had to raise our budgets dramatically to pay for those extra people. So we were very prudent in that regard. So as it's called ESSER funding, as the ESSER funding goes away, we find ourselves in a very good position. So because we've been so prudent, if you will, with that money. So I'm actually pretty excited about that, because there are a number of school districts who added bodies who now they have to pay for, and that's just extra budget when their ESSER funds go away.
Great. Jean Walsh, the same question to you. Is there something in this budget that stands out for you? You mentioned, supporting alternative pathways. Is there something in this budget that you feel is supported in what you bring to the body?
Well, I first want to kind of comment a little bit on what Jeff said, in that the approach has always been very, I would say, sustainable. So the idea of putting programs or people in place that would not be financially sustainable is basically what Jeff's talking about. And I implicitly trust our financial director, the conscientious decisions beyond, actually running the math, doing the numbers. Like it's not just one person. It's a huge team effort. But yeah, there's more than just prudent financial decisions being made. It's very thoughtful and mindful about, what's the long-term goal and working towards that. Speaking of prudent, though, one thing that I really do like about the budget is socking away some money for repairs, for keeping our buildings safe and healthy and not falling apart. And I think that is just like what any practical person would do, right? And even though it's like, okay, we finally have like a little bit of wiggle room here, like it's a sigh of relief, really, this current budget. But to say, okay, this is when you put some money away for the rainy day fund, because there's always going to be something that breaks, and it's going to, we have a safety net. So that's.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Matthew, have you had a chance to dig into this? And you're at a disadvantage as somebody who hasn't been in the meetings doing this regularly. But tell us why generally you support this budget.
Well, I think the fact that we're providing a bit of a attempted tax relief to Burlington residents with the budget is a real accomplishment and milestone that, given all the demands and all the needs that we have in our district and the cost of the high school and the other expenses that we're incurring, the fact that we were able, the school board, I would like to include myself in the board, was able to find a way to keep the budget at a small decrease is really impressive and really amazing. And I think that what Jeannie had suggested about the way of building sustainability into the budget is key and critical. We really do need to be thinking about how it is that we can build a sustainable district where we can keep our people employed, keep our people supported, and also educate our students really well.
And Kendra?
Yeah. Well, I obviously agree with everything that's been said. And I think I'm really proud of the way that our district has been budgeting, and I feel just as equal as they do. As I think we have an amazing superintendent. We have a wonderful director of our finance director, and we have been really careful about how we spend money, and not spending our federal dollars on people that will have to go away or that we have to support. So we tried to use that for one-time money. I'm also super, super proud of the advocacy that the school board has been doing and has done in Montpelier, the Act 127 for the weights that Jeannie had mentioned, and that this was really the first budget where Burlington gets to feel that tax impact of the changing of the weights. So essentially the weights hadn't been changed in over 20 years, and it was the outdated weights to begin with. They weren't data driven. And so the new weights had some studies and.
So let's just pause you.
Yeah.
Let's pause you there, because I think there are folks that are, oh yeah, I understand pupil weighting. Let's just go.
Yeah, what is
start, it? Yeah, what's pupil weighting?
Yeah, so all pupils take different amount of resources to educate. So let's take some of our English language learners where English is not their first language, right? So they're going to take more resources to educate than those who have English as their first language. So that is one example. We have students across the state, for example, who are in smaller school districts, that they also take more money in the sparsely populated rural districts because they don't have centralized services. We have our free and reduced lunch kids. We have some mental health services. So there's just students who require extra resources. And so instead of giving an equal amount for every student, there's weights for those students that need extra resources. And the rates are equivalent to having some dollars attached to that so that we can provide additional resources. So for example, when we've hired multilingual liaisons year-round, because we've needed to do that, that costs money. So the weights kind of take that into consideration, and then we get some extra tax capacity from the state. So with that extra tax capacity, with the changing of the weights, this is really the first year, because last year we had such a huge amount for our high school that we weren't really able to see. We would have had even a bigger tax
And
rate.
pupil weighting has been in existence, but they shifted that. They changed those weights.
They
Is that
changed
correct?
the
Yeah.
variable, they
Yeah.
changed the amount of the weights.
And this is year 2 for that.
That's right.
how
And so that
weighting's
was
going
really
on.
exciting to see how that change affected our taxes. And it
Yeah.
really, and we promised the taxpayers last year, we really asked a big ask for the high school, and it was necessary that we would do what we could to be diligent. And so
Yeah.
I'm excited to present this budget to the people.
I'd like to add, so for over 20 years, so basically how it works is everybody pays in to this one pool of money, that's the education fund. Every district says this is what we need, and then based on how many kids you have and the weights, you get a certain amount of money, right? The district gets a certain amount of money. If the district does not essentially get enough to educate their students, that's when you go to the taxpayers on town meeting day and you ask for another certain amount, right? And then I just want to say, basically the kids have always come first, and that's why we have buildings that were falling apart. That's why the high school was looking, deferred maintenance was happening, because the programs and the education was the priority
Instead of the capital.
for over 20 years.
Yeah. Which gets into this question of strategic priorities, but given the conversation, I just want to come back to the strategic priorities, and there's a list of them that the school district's current strategic plan identifies. But I think what's going on with the Trump administration is pretty top of mind for a lot of folks, and I think it has some potential direct effects on our students. Threatens to, specifically threatening to reduce any federal funds for any transgender students that are supported in sports, transgender students that are in sports, DEI efforts, literally ending immigration and the impact that is going to have on our school districts to see decreases in population potentially. So I'm wondering how this is bubbling up in the conversations at the school board, and what's the message that you want to give to voters and the public around this, that you're thinking about this? And I think, do we start with you? Yes, Jean, as we go around in circles.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, in preparation of the election, November election, or the possibility of a new administration, procedures were looked at and I would say firmed up around protecting and making explicitly clear how we were going to support our queer kids and also kids that are immigrants. I think, and recently there was a whole nother slew, another round of resources kind of called around how would somebody, a staff person in any school, take responsibility or not take responsibility for an ICE agent, I don't know what they're called, officer, coming to the school with any kind of inquiry. Like if they, it was made very clear, there is not a warrant signed by the judge. That person, no matter what kind of badge, they are not allowed in the school. They do not have a right to be in that school.
Yeah. Matthew,
Great.
are you thinking about this at all? Do you have thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think that it's a challenging time for so many individuals, and there's just a lot of uncertainty and a lot of fear and a lot of terror in the air. I think that Burlington as a city and our school district specifically, we have a core set of values that have sort of guided us for many, many years and sort of has helped give us a strong education system and help secure our students and make our students feel safe and welcome. I think that we need to stick by those values the best that we can through these very, very difficult times and do actions that are representative of those values, much like what Jeannie just said.
Kendra?
Yeah, agreed. It's very scary and it's really uncertain, and things keep changing. And so I feel like we all need to continue to keep our hand on the pulse and to really think about how some of the federal actions, the closing of potentially the Agency of Education and what that would do for federal funds, and our budget for Title I funds coming to support our most needy children, that's scary. We have been clear in Burlington about our values, though. We are really clear in everything, and it runs through our strategic plan. We're very clear on our diversity, equity, and inclusion policies. We have a wonderful person, Sparks, who's head of that. And I think that we really work hard in our school districts, and our community embraces diversity and an inclusive classroom. And so I think that is really embedded in almost everything that we do here. And it's one of the reasons I actually really love being in this community and in Burlington schools.
Thanks. And Jeff, any thoughts to share?
Not a lot more to add, just in full support.
Yeah. I mean, I think there is a question of how the conversation at the national level affects the conversation and affects that conversation around values. So it'll be interesting to see how you all maintain the conversation with each other at the school board, right? Maintaining, just being able to have those values front and center.
I think quelling the fear is real and it's warranted. Having a plan and having a script, there's literally a one-pager type script for anybody, any staff member, as a resource. Also, connections to resources outside of the school communities as well. I mean, there's plenty going on in Burlington and in Vermont. But the idea of this is how the school district is going to show up for me, advocate for me, and this is what is in their power to protect me. It is written down, and I think it needs to be just communicated more to the public that there is a system in place.
Thanks.
I would like to add, I feel like the communication from our district has been really great, and our superintendent has been really, he's really on it about communicating as he can about that policy, about things when the federal funds were being stopped. I think that the open, transparent communication with our school members, with our families, community members, I think that's what we're going to continue to do, because that's what we can do as well, is be open and honest. Here's the information we're getting. Here's how it might affect our students or our budget or teachers, because we're all in this together.
Yeah. Great.
I do want to point out that sometimes it's not a policy, it's a procedure. And I think when people are looking for those resources, looking for the answers, like, okay, does the school care about this? What's their stance on it? Or what exactly, are they going to do? And they go to the page that has policies and they don't realize they have to scroll way down to get to the procedures. It's the same sense of, it's plan, and it's supported by the board, whether or not it's policy. I just have to say procedures are incredibly useful because you don't have to read them twice in front of the board. You don't have to vote on them as a full board. They're more malleable, and they can actually react more in real time to better serve our students.
Got it. Great. The next question related to this is, what's the biggest challenge? And you're welcome to say what's the biggest challenge that you see in the school district, but you could also say, what do you feel like is the biggest strength? So I'm just going to switch that around. Kevin's switch. What's the biggest challenge facing Burlington schools, and how would you use your seat on the school board to address this issue? But if there's something that you want to share that's a strength, I welcome that as well. And Matthew, we're going to do this because there's something that inspired you to get involved, and that could be something that, how are you going to use, what do you want to do with this school board seat?
Well, I think that I would say that the biggest challenge we're facing is just that everything seems to be changing. there are a lot of things that are happening very quickly in our school district, in our education system statewide, nationally, and all of these changes are going to have big implications for how it's going to impact our students and our families here in the school district. And I think that's sort of the biggest challenge, is how do we properly adapt to the many changes that we are going to be facing as a school district here.
And Kendra?
Yeah, I think public education is under threat. And it's under threat by the federal government, and we have a lot of changes coming through in our in the Vermont legislature as well. The voucher system worries me, and I think that we have our work cut out for us. It's always a challenge. I feel like there's that fine balancing act that we do all the time between trying to fund our schools so that the teachers are well paid, our staff is well paid, our students are getting the resources that they need, and our taxpayers can afford to live in Burlington. It's always the struggle that I feel like when you sit on the school board and you have to make those choices. And I think it's made even more complicated this year by the threat of federal funds going away, changing of the funding formula and potentially the weights. How's the voucher program going to be working with every student maybe being able to get a voucher and go to private school? Will that drain money away from the public schools? What's going to happen to local control? I mean, the school boards, here we are sitting on a school board that who knows if it's going to exist in a couple years at this level. With the plans, it's not. So I'm saying lots of challenges because there are lots of challenges.
Yeah.
I think a strength that we have on our board.
Those are all, everything that you've said are political challenges outside of the students and teachers.
But are going to directly impact them all.
Directly impact everything. But I will say I think we have really strong board members, and we have a great superintendent, and we have great staff at BSD, and so I feel that we have the people and the willpower and the desire to continue to make a difference.
Which anything proves
Thoughts
our
on this?
resiliency.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
You want to talk about our
Wanna jump?
resiliency? You talked about that already.
I'd like to talk about what's on my mind
Yeah.
in terms of a challenge.
Yeah.
And I'd ask if whoever is watching this obviously cares about education. If you're not already up to speed on the governor's proposal to change the public education landscape, I would ask that you look at it carefully. I would characterize it as a state takeover of public education. It essentially eliminates every school board in the state, moves the control up to 5 regional districts, moves the State Board of Ed over into the Agency of Education. I think maybe for some, I'll just say maybe for some smaller towns that aren't really viable, maybe, but for Burlington, I mean, if you think about it, having grown up here, a number of us, education has been local. And it's not clear to me that the governor's proposal is an appropriate response, especially to, let's say, I'll just talk about the Burlington School District. I, as a parent, wouldn't want some faceless bureaucrat or some sort of 5-member school board representing 1/5 of the entire state of Vermont making important decisions about which facilities to upgrade, teachers and support staff, psychologists. I think education does need to, at least in Burlington, stay in our district.
Yeah, so talk about that just a little bit. These 5 districts, this is a proposal that the governor put forth. It's kind of a massive kind of consolidation on the sort of bureaucratic level, if you can call it that. But where would Burlington sit in relationship? Who would Burlington be in relationship to? Do you know?
Well, we'd be part of a district whose name escapes me, but we're lumped in with our neighbors.
And the neighbors would be?
All the way up to the
Up to
Canadian
St.
border.
Albans?
So Franklin and Chittenden County, generally speaking, subject to anybody actually having the governor's proposal in front of them and saying,
yeah.
no, that's not exactly right. But generally speaking, it's all of our neighbors, I think, Essex, Chittenden South.
So what you're characterizing is the education in St. Albans the same, are those the same needs as the education in Burlington? And how would you have a conversation between St. Albans and Burlington?
And the responsiveness
Yeah.
between the school board, the superintendent, and community members,
Yep.
parents, others with a stake in the system. I think you're going to lose that. And I don't think that's consistent with Vermont's values. And I don't think it's an appropriate response to a good instinct. The instinct on the governor's part was, hey, look, education funding's getting so expensive, we got to do something. And I don't think the legislators had any solution whatsoever. So the governor came up with something, and I think that leaves the legislators.
I think the legislator did put forth a plan, but I can't, but you,
Well,
again, if you're at home, you can look
yeah, you
through-
can correct any of my
Yeah, yeah,
facts, but it's my impression
Yeah.
that the governor did come up with something,
Yeah.
and there was nothing to rebut it,
Yeah,
nothing
so now we have
substantial.
something to respond
So now we're in a position of saying, oh, okay, well, we don't really have anything to rebut. My rebuttal is, at least speaking for my district, I don't think it's a very good idea to take away local control, and I think we've been prudent with our spending.
So your biggest challenge is also a political one, and you're going to be using your seat to advocate for a different kind of plan.
Well, again, on my seat, I like to have this board be no drama, stick to its knitting. But the larger picture is, I don't think it's a prudent idea.
Great. Jean, did we start with you on this question? I think, no, we didn't. Go ahead.
Oh,
Thanks. Yeah.
I'm still trying to wrap my head around it, and there's a part of me that wonders if it's such a drastic sort of model. It almost seems like he's just waiting for everybody the governor is just waiting for everybody to just say no, because it's too drastic. It seems there's no in between. You go from, I think it's 119 or 116 districts right now to 5. And the one that Burlington would be in, I think it's around 34,000
Students.
Yeah.
compared to, I think the lowest one is around 15,000. So even like when you do, like if you were looking at this plan to distribute resources somewhat equitably and evenly, that in itself seems a little weird. And also being the 34,000, it's 7 representatives, not 5. Everybody only gets 5. But yeah, it just seems so extreme. Even if he talked about,
So,
I think I might even digest 25 compared to 5.
yeah. I mean, part of this, one of the things that people talk about in the kind of upheaval around education is that we're spending a lot of money, but we're not getting the standardized test results. So we're measuring success based on standardized test results, which, and again, this question's written, and if I'm wrong about this, but my understanding is standardized test results continue to decrease since the pandemic. How, what are we doing wrong? Are we measuring wrong? Are we asking the wrong questions? Are we, spending too much money and not getting what we need? How do you answer this question about how do you measure the success of the school district and, more importantly, the students and the communities that are receiving this education? And I have no idea who started, so whoever wants to jump in on this first is welcome.
Well, I also look at compared nationally, where it's happening. This is a national thing. This is not like Burlington is somehow worse off.
Yeah.
What was the last report we read where we got this is how Burlington compares to the rest of Vermont and then nationally? What was that? The annual report.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, we do, I think we are tracking we do look at that, and their standardized testing is important to see how our BSD is tracking against other Vermont schools and against the nation. And one example is, we adopted a new literacy program last year because we realized the way that our literacy scores were not good. So we've changed that, and we have followed the metrics, and for the past year or so, our numbers have drastically improved. It's been a great success. So I think it is important to continue to to look at the scores and to really do a deep dive into looking at, does the math program, is it working? How are we teaching science? I think those are the deeper dives we need to do. I would like us to continue to track student improvement over the grades, so it's taking it down to a little more granular level. But if a student comes in 3 grade levels behind in reading and goes up 2 grade levels, but they're still not meeting grade level, that's improvement. So I'd also like to be able to track improvement per grade by student, which is a little more detail. But we are looking at those measurements, and as Jeannie said, it's a problem. More and more kids are coming in with real trauma, and Matthew, you had mentioned a lot of the mental health issues that are coming in, and schools are doing so much more than just education. But we need to be getting these test scores up.
Jeff or Matthew, do you have anything to say about how you would measure success of the school district and students?
Sure. I mean, it's definitely more than just test scores. We have some attendance problems. That's not just Burlington, that's nationally. If you're not in the classroom, you're missing out on key learning time. So success would be better attendance. We're watching that carefully, trying to promote it. What else? Achievement gap, we're looking at that. That's been incredibly hard to move the dial on. I don't know if anyone's figured that out yet, but everybody's working hard on that, not only in Burlington, again,
When you say
nationally.
achievement gap, define that for me.
Achievement gap would be, you could define it in a number of different ways, but one could have to do with race differences, the other could be socioeconomic, and it just tends to be that, kids from higher socioeconomic status tend to perform better.
On test scores
for
or
example.
in college.
In general.
Yeah.
And so how do we narrow that gap?
Got it.
And that is part of the equitable education.
Matthew, you have thoughts on this measuring?
Yeah, I would say a couple things. The first is that these evaluations and these test scores are a measurement of how a student is learning, but not necessarily an indicator of the quality of the student, the quality of the person, the quality of the school. And I think that sometimes we conflate those two things. If test scores are not doing well, then that must say something about the students or the teachers or the school system. I think it's just a way to sort of understand how are we doing as a school district, and are there things that we need to focus on to try and adjust? And also, what are the strengths and what are the real things that we're doing to help our students here? I would also say too that all of the many challenges that we've seen with our students, current events, as well as also the mental health challenges these students are facing, are very much intertwined with their academic performance. If you are coming from a household that is in disarray and chaos, it can be really hard to sit down and focus on the lesson that you were being taught. At the same time, if you have those difficulties and that experiences within you, when you're given a worksheet that you can barely read the instructions, that's going to cause a strong stress reaction in those students. These two things are very much related, and figuring out how we can both support the emotional needs of our students while also helping build their educational skills is really, I think, a key piece to solving some of this puzzle.
Great. We have about 10, 15 minutes left. I'm going to jump to the teacher well-being and retention, and then maybe we can hit some of these other questions. Or if there's a question that is on this list that you're really excited to answer, I would also like to hear that. So I know Burlington School District has struggled on and off over the last few years. We've had some leadership changes and challenges. What's your current understanding of the level of morale in the district, and what's the role of the school board? What is the role that you play in retaining leadership and good teachers in our district? And support staff, that's also in there too. Thanks. And I guess we're going to start with Kendra. We'll just go around this way if that's okay.
Sure,
Thanks.
no problem. It's super important to keep excellent teachers and staff. We work hard at that. And you're right, there was a strike, I'm going to say like eight years ago or somewhere around there. That really was very hard. And for everybody and the community. And I think the board has worked really hard at collaborating with the school district, collaborating with teachers, really having a good relationships with our teachers. I think when you have a great teacher in the classroom, like that will help all of these students, right? So we want to keep really great teachers. And at the same time, teachers have one of the hardest jobs, even harder than they've ever had since COVID. And COVID was really hard, and of course we're still seeing the ramifications from COVID. And I think that teachers need even more resources to help them. And this is where I think we're all struggling with, like, how do we provide all the resources that teachers need to be able to teach and to keep the well-being of students at hand too. So I think I appreciate and want to see continued collaboration with our teachers and ask them what is going well and what they need help on. We are trying to engage them in some of our, in surveys, and some of our strategic plan incorporates really touching base with them. And so I think we need to continue to do that, and we need to continue to keep the great teachers that we have.
Jeff, do you have a sense of the current level of morale in the district, and what is your role on the board of helping to retain good leadership, teachers, and support staff?
My sense is that morale is pretty darn good in general, with always some exceptions here and there and some pockets that come up over time, but then things get resolved. But my sense is morale is generally good. My sense is, in the main, the teachers perceive that we do have a strong administration and a supportive school board. And my own role has been on the board as the chair of the negotiations and bargaining committee, where we're bargaining their contracts, that we actually prioritize paying teachers well. Teachers should be paid competitive salary and benefits. Working conditions need to be reasonable to avoid, bad morale and burnout. We do need, and I think we have this to some degree or another, and it's come and gone a bit, obviously, but strong school leadership, principles that the teachers respect and trust and are happy working with. But in general, yeah, it's all those things. Big fan of supporting teachers and paying them as well as we can afford to as a community.
Thanks, Jean.
I think it would be not nice to say, oh yeah, morale's great, but then, obviously there's going to be people out there that are not feeling that. So I don't want to necessarily say that. Personally, though, I have not gotten emails and phone calls probably for about 2 years now, like I used to. So there are not people contacting me because they are upset at the workplace in the district. So that's a fact, and that's good. I know that the district has worked on creating personal development or professional development opportunities, structured stuff where there's a continuum of information, for a series, kind of like a workshop series, but it's over the course of the school year. I think that there's been an effort to have meaningful learning opportunities for teachers, and I've attended some of them. As a teacher at Rock Point, I was able to sign up for a couple. They were great. I mean, we had like buddies that we checked in with about like putting things into practice in our classrooms. I know that the district is definitely trying to make these learning opportunities genuine. So, but how
Thanks.
it's actually sussing out, it's hard to tell.
Yeah, great. And Matthew, are you jumping on the board? 'Cause
Sure.
you're young,
I can speak to the experiences that I've had in being a parent of 2 children in the Burlington School District, and what we've seen in our school system. And our teachers, as a school board member, I think the thing I would want to tell to our teachers is that we've got your back. and seeing the challenges that our teachers are facing in the classroom each day of just having to deal with students and having to deal with the many varied positions that teachers are asked to hold, just knowing that the school board is supportive of them, cares for them, is looking out for them. And again, as I mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, being the child of a school teacher, seeing how helpful it is to have an upper administration that you know is going to be supportive of the choices you're making in the classroom, the way you're handling with your students, just makes all the difference. So that's what I hope to be on the school board.
Great. I'm going to jump back up to the strategic priorities question. And you mentioned a strategic plan, so maybe somebody can talk about where you're at in the strategic planning process. There's a current strategic plan, I don't know what year you're at, identifies 5 priorities: belonging and well-being, deeper learning for every student, reimagined high school, we're getting there, educators who look like our students, and relationship-based communities through restorative practices. And my question is, which of these are you most excited to work on, and how do you approach these priorities? From your position on the school board, and I'm just wondering if you talk about it a little bit to help people understand those strategic priorities. And are we in the middle of this plan, or where are we at in this plan? And I think Jeff will start with you.
With me?
I think we will, because I think
Sure.
we're trying to rotate the go around.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'd ask my colleagues to correct me if I have anything wrong. But I think we're in year 3 of a 5-year strategic plan. It took a year or 2 to put the thing together. So, almost four years in, if you will, including the planning phase. And I do think we have, it's more of implemented at the operational level. Mm-hmm. So the board takes more of an oversight where the superintendent and his team does report to us periodically about how things are going. And I'm a big fan of the strategic plan. Moving the needle substantially in any area turns out to be very challenging. But I think we are certainly doing our very best as a school district, the teachers, the administrators, the staff, everybody rowing together in the same direction. The part of the question, Megan, was which one do you like best, and what are you most excited to work on in the strategic plan? I mean, things that I'm really happy we prioritized would be this sense of belonging. Because as you know, we've got a diverse community, and that can lead to some challenges in terms of sense of belonging. But it's so important to feel like you belong. You've got people in the building who care about you, adults who know you. And so we care deeply about that. I don't mean we on the board. I mean, that's what, at the operational level, we care deeply about. And also this idea of deeper learning. You want to make the learning relevant and interesting, and you want to kind of go deep. Everybody's probably heard of a program that we all love at the high school level called Burlington City and Lake. It's sort of an experience-based program. It's every other day for a semester. And from what I've heard, that's a great alternative pathway for kids who aren't just satisfied with the classroom all day long. So we have alternatives. There are kids, including at least one of mine, who was satisfied with classroom courses. And also the thing that's great that goes along with this deeper learning is our connection with the BTC, the Burlington Technical Center, and the programs we have. So I'm really excited about that aspect of the plan too, but I don't want to take up all the airspace, so.
Well, the diversity, we all serve on committees, so there's a whole other component of board work that we do. I serve on the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, and each year we prioritize what we're going to work on. We are prioritizing priority area 4 and 5, and like Jeff said, it is more about oversight than it is influence, although, of course, of course we're going to make suggestions and conversation about it. For example, the code of conduct, the restorative code of conduct was rolled out the beginning of this school year, but it was about 2-3 years in the development. But previous to that, there were a lot of complaints, or not necessarily complaints. There is a situation, there's a conflict, but it doesn't rise to the level.
You're good.
You sure? It doesn't
We've
rise
got
to the
5
level.
minutes. Go ahead.
It doesn't rise to the level of like being investigated or really getting whatever kind of like resolve. And therefore the kid does not, or the kid or the teacher or the parent does not feel heard, does not feel like anything's being done. You know, we hear this all the time, right? Nothing's being done. The code of conduct, one of the main things that I really like about it is it addresses how to resolve persistent like microaggressions. Also, teachers or staff, adults in our school communities are held to the same expectations as the students, which feels really the distribution of power, in my opinion, is a good thing.
Great, thank you, Jean. Matthew, these strategic priorities, what calls to you?
I mean, I would say that as a person who has worked with those who have struggled with mental health needs and also has expertise in working with folks who have experienced traumatic events, the restorative practices piece is something that I'm really most excited about, because a lot of kids who come from these really difficult households act out in ways that can be really challenging for them, but also challenging for their classmates, and building a way to help their classmates and the community understand what they're going through and be able to bring them in and incorporate them into the community and make them is really a wonderful way to heal. So that's what I'll. Yeah.
Thanks, Kendra.
Yeah. I kind of look at all of the priorities of the strategic plan. It's kind of like the North Star. And as these guys mentioned, it really is, we have the oversight. And so we're setting objectives and we look at metrics, and that's kind of our level. We're not down deep into the operations. And so I actually, in coming up with this plan, I think a lot of these areas are really exciting to me. And some of the metrics, things like taking care of, looking at the achievement gap and trying to increase proficiency in math and in reading, but also in closing the achievement gap between those who are on free and reduced lunch and math and reading. And having 90% of our graduates, in some kind of post-secondary education or in a job afterwards. These are the metrics that I think working towards it is like having the whole district have these guiding stars. And even the funding, we think about how, or if we're thinking about new funding, how does it fall into the strategic plan? And before that, we weren't using a strategic plan in that way. So it's like a vision for our district. And I think it's really a good thing that we've all followed and appreciated.
Great. So thank you all for being here with us. bsdvt.org to find not only the strategic plan, but also link to the school commissioners and your emails. So as Jean says, she's got room in her email inbox to hear from you.
Did we talk about the ballot language?
We could read the ballot. We have done a budget presentation with the superintendent.
Oh, great,
Did come
okay.
in and did a
Sounds good.
presentation on the budget.
Yes.
Yeah, and there's so much more to talk about. There's so much more to talk about. Thank you all for being here tonight, and thank you all for tuning in. Again, if you want to watch this or other programs, cctv.org/TMD 2025. You can also watch us on youtube.com/townmeetingtv. That's where you can watch all of the forums and tune in on election night to hear how the vote went on the budget. And there are a couple of contested elections in the city council race in Burlington. That is March 4th. Your ballots should be in the mail today or soon. So check in if you haven't seen a ballot in the mail, or show up at the polls on March 4th and vote 7 to 7. Thanks for watching.